So then, if you awaken from this illusion,
persistence of vision.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the show. I am Lance Myers.
And I'm L.B. Dio.
We'll be your hosts for the next half hour as you listen to episode 4 of the Persistence of Vision podcast.
Wait! Before you get any further, what's this music that started our show?
That is the Persistence of Vision theme song, composed by our friend Jerm Pollitt while in the band A Monster's Guts.
Now, where can I hear more of this excellent band, A Monster's Guts?
Well, you get on the internet, you go to a site called bandcamp.com, search for A Monster's Guts. It's that easy.
I've heard of the internet. Are there more sites up there than just this Bandcamp thing?
Yes,
Lance?
there is one other site you can go to. It's the Persistence of Vision Publishing website, which is pov-publishing.com. There you can read poetry by Wallace Myers and W. Joe Hoppe. You can read sequential art and comics by Walt Holcomb, Mac White, Shannon Wheeler, and Penny Van Horn. And you can also order my novel, Why So Much?
Oh, your novel is out. Fantastic. If only there were a tool that would do the work of all these. When do we celebrate?
We are going to celebrate the release of my first novel, Why So Much, on June 8th. That's 2019, for those of you in the future listening to this from the past. June 8th, 2019, at Malvern Books in Austin.
Wonderful. I'll be there.
But enough about us, and enough about the future. What is happening in the present moment, right now?
Well, Lance, today we are going to talk about one of my very favorite books, Infinite Jest, with one of my favorite people, Shannon McCormick. If you can love a man, then I love Shannon McCormick.
Yay, Shannon's here.
Hey.
Infinite Jest is a science fiction novel. It's a postmodernist novel. It's a modernist novel. It's a philosophical treatise. It's a comic novel. It's an epic. It's a tragedy, and an espionage thriller, and a novel of the body. The book's themes and influences range from Homer and Shakespeare to Dostoevsky and Wittgenstein, from competitive tennis and substance abuse to the consumption of resources and the elimination of waste, from consumerism and popular culture to ultraviolence, terrorism, and death.
What else is it?
Well, let's find out. What do you say, Shannon McCormick?
I mean, that's a really great summary. It's also, I mean, the thing that you didn't mention, or maybe you did mention it and I missed it because there's a flurry of things it's about. It's also, of course, about entertainment and
Yes.
the entertainment
Right.
of the title of this contraband videotape produced by the main character's father, which compels one, once they have started watching it, to give up all other bodily desires except for to watch this tape.
Right.
And this is the tape that's called Infinite Jest.
It's only, I think it's referred to in the book as the entertainment.
Well, I think
And then it loops, or it refers, and then it refers to Infinite Jest from Hamlet, of course. But no, what's on the tape is never revealed.
Yes.
What it is that is so compelling is never really revealed.
So there's a tape on the loose, just making sure that our audience is with us.
Yes.
There's a tape floating around that has an entertainment on it. There is an entertainment so powerful
Mm-hmm.
that people lose all desire to do anything other than to watch it.
Correct.
And then what happens to them?
Well, they end up just watching it forever on a loop and wasting away. But what's really crazy is then you never really see it in action. It's kind of a MacGuffin in its own book. So there's a plot to find it, or there's like lots of conversations of people trying to track it down, but it never really goes anywhere.
Mhm.
It's also been a long time since I've read Infinite Jest. So for those who haven't read it, and I think Infinite Jest is one of those books that's more talked about than read. Our main character's name is Hal Incandenza. He is a tennis player at a tennis academy run by his family. His father, James, is an avant-garde filmmaker who has in the not too distant past committed a very gruesome suicide via sticking his head in the microwave.
Yes.
And he is the producer of the entertainment is sort of his magnum opus that is never really formally released, but is somehow leaked out from his archives and is floating around. And yeah, that's just kind of the top line surface level of the plot of the book, of which I find the book to be a page turner, but it's not. The plot isn't the delight in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the delight? What is it that makes, because this like you said, it's almost more talked about than it is read.
Yeah.
And it makes all these like Time Magazine had it in the top 100 English language books written between 1923 and 2005. Like it's this force. It made a huge impact when it came out. Why?
I think so. I have a couple theories on that. I read it when it first came out. I was living in Prague at the time, and so I read it in 1996. It had come out. I think it came out in the States in '95, and a friend of mine brought it back from New York. And there was a group of us living in Prague, mostly American expats, but a few Brits and some other folks. And we handed around this copy, like it was samizdat literature or something. We had one copy of Infinite Jest. And so my then girlfriend, now wife, and I were reading it at the same time, so we had like 4 bookmarks in it, because of the footnotes in the back. Why it was a force? I think it was for me. I mean, I read it in my 20s as a writer, and I felt like it was the first time I had read a book that just was blowing open the possibilities of what you could do in a novel. And I think it comes out at a time when the fad of kind of a Raymond Carver minimalist, very understated prose style and very sort of naturalistic situations, which was prevalent in the lit world for a long time, was fading. And here was this big bombshell of a postmodern book that was maximalist in every possible way. From the plot is crazy. It's 1,000+ pages. It's got footnotes in the end that you have to read to help make sense of other parts of the book. So it's got flipping pages back and forth.
300 pages plus of footnotes.
Of footnotes, and if you don't read
endnotes.
Of endnotes, and if you don't read them, there's lots of plot stuff that happens in the endnotes. So you have to kind of toggle back and forth.
But what's weird to me, I guess it's not weird, but it's a point to make at this particular junction when you talk about what this book was and the monster that it was, and how it's so huge, it's so dense, it's so wild. If it had been written by anyone less talented, it would have been so obnoxious.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I think there's a lot of people who find it obnoxious anyway. There's a lot. It is an oft-critiqued book. I think it, although I am a big fan, I think its fan base can be a little bit obnoxious sometimes. I think that's one of the things too. So its wildness is not just there in the conceit of its ideas, but also just on the language. I mean, the guy David Foster Wallace wrote in a way that was extremely verbose, but extremely conversational, and it feels like how Americans talk, and it's very mediated. There's lots of references.
He's so gifted at doing that without seeming like, hey kids, I'm talking like you. He's got this, I think that is his charm. I think that's his gift.
His voice is just, it's the voice that he brings. The force of his personality is there on the page.
Well, that's one of his gifts.
Yeah,
it's one of his many.
He's sort of an aw shucks genius.
Yeah, there's a humility even while he's showing off that's I find really remarkable and compelling.
And amazingly, it's a monster success too. I mean, here's a literary novel which has sold over 1 million copies.
Yeah, and it's huge.
And it's 1,000 pages.
Now, and then the joke is how many people really finish it. I finished the whole thing. I know there's a lot of half-read copies out there, but that's
I don't find it terribly difficult to get through. I've read it more than once, and I'm not a fast reader. I'm not one of these guys that just dives in and finishes a book immediately. But I find that sometimes I'll try to read several books, and I'll get halfway done, and I'll start thinking, I just don't like to read.
Right.
Maybe I'm just not. Maybe
I'm done with words.
Yeah, so maybe I'm just not one of these
This
guys.
is not
who
the
really
right show for you,
enjoys
Lance.
reading. But then I'll pick up a David Foster Wallace book, and I'll be, oh yeah, okay,
This
I
is what it's
do like
about.
to read.
This
And I mean, I've read everything the guy published,
right.
and I was actually rereading through everything he published when it was announced that he had passed. And it was just heartbreaking.
Yeah, but I think to me, my favorite part of the book is all the Don Gately sections in the halfway house in the recovery.
Yeah,
Me
you
too.
mentioned
Me
that
too.
Hal was the main character.
Hal's the main character, but
Gately
Don
is the
Gately
other
is the heart of the book. He's
my
really the
favorite
main
too.
character,
That's
and I think he's a great. He's one of the great characters in American literature, and I don't see it talked about that way, but he's just an amazing character.
I've never heard anybody say that, but I feel the exact same way.
I really feel that like his portrayal, the empathy that David Foster Wallace brings to a guy struggling with addiction, and then you find out later that those struggles were Wallace's own, that he had some severe substance abuse issues that I didn't know about at the time that I read Infinite Jest. But just his ability to dive into 12-step and make it compelling. I mean, the Don Gately stuff is a lot of just sitting around. Those guys are just sitting in that halfway house, killing time, and it's really compelling.
Well, you know who Gately is based on?
I don't actually.
Hercules.
Oh, that makes sense. And
There's a scene in the book where he is doing his halfway house. You have to do like a work thing. You have to work.
The labors of
And
Hercules.
he cleans the bathroom with a hose, the way that Hercules cleaned the Phrygian stables, and all this other stuff. There's all these references that you don't pick it up the first time you read the book, or most of it you wouldn't pick up the second time or the third time. It's just like so abstruse, but it's wonderful when you hear it. I think
I love it, and there's a ton of really great. I think one of the reasons it's successful is like the people who buy books and read books are like your lit majors and aspiring writers, so they've got a certain level of literary knowledge. There's so many like crazy cool references built in. I mean, you've got Shakespeare. I think the conversations with Marath and the Canadian guys is based on the Weiss play, the Persecution and whatever of Jean-Paul Marat as performed by the Marquis de Sade, which is a philosophical conversation between the Marquis de Sade and Jean-Paul Marat as staged in an asylum. Because that's actually an adaptation of that play, was one of James Incandenza's movies. It's like listed in his filmography. And then you go, oh wait, that's what's playing out in these conversations.
What's funny is like so you mentioned this as if it's like this great thing, and when I and I hate that I do this, but I kind of roll my eyes when it's like, oh, this is based on this, because again, in lesser hands that can be so stupid and so like
it would be a disaster. Well, look, I was okay. So
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Not long after that, I was in a. So I hate that too. Like, if it's not done well, I was in a workshop one time and a guy brought in a story that was like. It was a mess, and then we got to the end, and it was like, oh, but it's based on the Minotaur and whatever.
So
it was like,
often,
who cares?
Yeah.
Like
so
it wasn't
compelling.
It wasn't compelling as its own.
Right.
It's got to be compelling and stand on its own, and then if you get the extra bonus references, cool, that's neat.
Right.
Yeah.
But and then the way it plays high art and low art. I mean, there's like the whole crazy thing about. I can't exactly remember. One of the characters is obsessed with MASH, and Major Burns, and Major Burns was like, just by his name, was a harbinger of the apocalypse.
It's Gately's father.
Yeah, and
no, somebody's father.
Somebody's father, and there's just like lots of little, one of the most ridiculous bits in the book is if you remember when they're having the Eschaton tennis game.
Yes.
Basically doing war games, but with tennis balls.
Yes.
And one of the young tennis school attendees gets his head stuck in a microwave or something.
A
computer. He gets his head in a computer, and it's so like jaggedly and delicately placed around his neck that they can't remove
They can't
the
extract them.
monitor. So he's walking around with a computer monitor on his head with a busty nurse kind of finagling him around.
And his name is Otis P. Lord.
Otis P. Lord, who was one of Emily Dickinson's correspondents.
Yes.
You know, so it's just like these weird, like, okay, he's named after some guy from, like, you know, Boston Brahmin Society in the 19th century, and yet now he's this ridiculous, just like lots of little Easter eggs and stuff in there that I love.
And of course, Wallace himself had such an interesting background. You know, he's a son of academics.
Mm-hmm.
He is a person whose passions include tennis, include philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
which he majored in, include mathematics, all of which are absolutely central to the story of this book. And yet, the book is not academic in any way. It's completely entertaining and absorbing and human.
Yeah, I think his greatest quality as a writer is his empathy for individuals. Like, even the most messed up characters in that book, he can draw in such a way that you really feel their humanity, and I just think he's great, and it shows out through all the rest.
Well,
of
he's
his
so
work,
lucid. I feel like he's so aware of. I mean, all great writers really have to be, you know, to pick out the things that you know, where we'll read and we'll say, oh, I've always felt that way, but I've never quite seen, you know, like
I've never seen it written down before.
Right.
And Infinite Jest definitely has.
Yeah.
Just like every other page, there's a moment like that.
But you can imagine like somebody that lucid, but also having a nervous breakdown and being able to describe it like step by step as it's happening, and that sort of, I mean, there's elements of that in this book.
Yeah.
So do you believe in the myth of the, you know, tortured genius, the mad scientist, as it were?
Yes, because Wallace, as you mentioned, Wallace committed suicide about
Yes.
10 years ago. And yeah, so what do you think about that?
I mean, I suspect that his. I don't think it's a one size fits all. Right, so I think there are great artists who they might be complete sociopaths and don't actually, on a personal level, understand other people, but they're, you know, they're wonderful stylists, or they can structure books in amazing ways, and I'm trying to think of somebody that would fit the bill. But I do think that somebody like you, I think somebody like Wallace probably has. But I think, you know, somebody like Wallace, who the impression I have is just such a wide open person and perceptive about other people. I suspect that everything was, you know, coming in and impinging on him in ways that allowed him to write well, but, you know, also probably tortured him in other ways outside, which, I mean, you know, it seems to have been the case. But I don't think, I think you need to have both. I think that that perception and that empathy for other human beings doesn't amount to much unless you have the chops or the craft and the discipline to pull off a book like that. I mean, he obviously wrote like a maniac to produce that book. I mean, I think he wrote it in something like 6 months or something.
What?
Like that.
Really?
It was fast. It was less than that, but it was more than 6 months, but it was a short period of time.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, I think that for somebody like that, you probably have a certain advantage by being that perceptive about the way people are, but you also need to have those writing skills to be able to pull it off.
Have you read what works of his? Have you
So again, like in this Samizdat way, I think we also passed around a Xerox copy of the Harper's supposedly fun thing I will never do again. The cruise ship thing was a big hit. Actually, one of my favorite bits of his, which I read before Infinite Jest, which is why I was so keen to read it when my friend Neil brought it back from the States, was the novella that's in the end of his collection of stories. The novella is called Westward the Course of Empire Takes Its Way, which is... it's more inside baseball than Infinite Jest. It's a critique of John Barth's metafiction, but and Trapped in the Funhouse, but also just an insane, crazy story. It's so good. I really love that novella. I've not read Broom of the System, and I've not read what's the Pale King Bryce book. I haven't read that, and then I read Brief Interviews with Hideous Men as well. I think Infinite Jest is the pinnacle of his career, obviously.
I did read Pale King. I liked it a lot.
I did too.
One thing that there's a quote I'd like to bounce off you.
Mm-hmm.
When he was talking about Infinite Jest at one point, David Foster Wallace said, I set out with this book to write something sad, and I was very surprised when people kept coming up to me and telling me how funny it was.
Look, no, I get it. Part of it is, I think the breeziness of his tone can often lead to people thinking that he's kidding around or being playful when it's actually he's talking about heavy duty stuff. I mean, there's a lot of really bleak stuff in that book. But he has an inherent playfulness, and I think he's maybe being a bit disingenuous when he finds it surprising.
Yeah, I don't know how you can be surprised.
Yeah. He's got, there's Otis P. Lord with a computer monitor in his head. I mean, there's ridiculous
The guy
things.
that plays tennis with a gun to his head, a Glock to his head, threatening to kill himself if he ever loses.
Yeah, I mean, but so when I said look, I was thinking of myself, and I think specifically, I do a lot of improv. And some of it's just context, right? So people go to an improv show and even they want it to be funny. So like we'll do improvised blah, it's whatever the narrative is that we're going to kind of shape. We've already preconceived how we're going to shape the narrative. And we're not trying deliberately to make it funny. We're just trying to hit the notes of what that narrative genre is. And it comes out funny just because of the environment and the context, etc. And I think he, with his tone, with his situations, sets things up in a way that you are prone to see the comedy in them. I mean, he's a great comedic writer. I know, but I think it's partly because he isn't trying to be funny.
Yes,
it's not like Douglas Adams.
Right.
He's not like a jokester on the page. He's not trying to riff and just be clever every single second.
Right.
So I think it makes the peaks of the comedy even funnier, actually.
Yes.
I heard someone, and I don't know the history of this term. I think it was coined out actually relatively recently, but hysterical realism.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, right. Just complete absurdity, but juxtaposed with these moments of sobriety that are very dark and real and human.
I mean, another writer that I love a lot is Philip Roth, and he was a very proponent of what he called the American Berserk, right? And I think in his way, Wallace writes about the American Berserk, where what a strange and bizarre country.
Yes.
And Infinite Jest, I haven't read it, but I wonder reading, if I were to pick it up and read it now, the way that the years are sponsored by products.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, the book starts out in the year of the Whopper, is it the year of Glad?
Glad, I think.
But there's a year of Glad, there's the year of the Whopper.
You're the Whataburger. There's the year of the Maytag Whisper Quiet Dryer.
Yes.
And the Depends Adult Undergarment.
Yes.
And it seems ridiculous, but at the same time, it's like, there's product placement everywhere. So it'd be interesting to think
Yeah.
about like how that has played out in the last 20 years of American life. To think
Another
about.
thing about it that's so insane is the structure of the plot, which the author claimed was based on a fractal shape called the Sarpisky pyramid. It's the pyramid that has there's a triangle within triangles with triangles in it, and, and it just go down progressively into smaller and smaller triangles, making up. And he said that this is the, I guess as a normal novel might have a bell curve or something. This has this incredibly ludicrously complex fractal triangle
as its organizing principle.
Yes.
I had not heard that one before. I mean, I think the fact that the book ends in a flashback.
Yes. Well, it really is infinite, right? I mean,
right.
The first page of the book is also the last page of the book.
Yeah. The book ends with Gately, but in the past,
right,
when he's got the giant stash of Dilaudid before he had gone into rehab. Mm-hmm. So it ends. In the
past. It ends
in the past. It starts after
the chronologically furthest
in the future. Furthest in the future is Hal interviewing to go to college.
Yes.
And we never really know what's happened to him.
Yes.
Except that he's probably had some psychotic break, that he's completely lucid in his own mind and is some sort of simpering idiot
externally.
That's one of my favorite parts of the whole book. Yes. That's what has led me to read it multiple times. It's just I want to read that first part again.
It keeps looping back, and you're like, what happened to him? He took his DMT or whatever.
But it's such a great little snapshot of what it feels like to just not be understood.
Yeah.
That feeling of alienation and being in a situation like a job interview, or as the case may be, in an interview to get into a school, and have that be like the stakes are so high, and he's being scrutinized, and
they're just completely horrified by him. Right? We're like, what is happening? Yeah,
That's remarkable. Yeah, an interesting one. Going back to this structure of the novel, one of the effects of that you see that this pyramid shape or this triangle shape has filled areas and blank areas, and the novel's story has huge sections that are essentially missing. Some of the most important events, if not the most important events of the novel, are not depicted in the novel.
Right.
Some of the most important characters are not depicted in the novel. They're only briefly alluded to, and yet if you look at the story, they are key parts of the book.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So back to its impact and how people received it, like what it did for literature. I mean, do you think that it changed the way we view authors? I mean, did it bring the rock star author back into?
I think a little bit. I think in some ways, and they were friends. I think. I mean, this is going to seem petty. I think that Jonathan Franzen, occupies a space kind of cleared out by David Foster Wallace. Right. I don't think I don't like Franzen nearly as much as I like Wallace.
Right.
In fact, I'm one of those people who enjoys making fun of Franzen for being such a kind of uptight,
kind of a lightning rod,
uptight asshole. But I think he occupies a space sort of cleared out by David Foster Wallace. I think in other ways, like somebody like a Junot Diaz kind of can operate in that space. That it was the first book I felt that did a good job of writing about how people live currently, which is very mediated. We're on devices or consumers of junky pop culture stuff, but dealt with it in a realistic, or dealt with it in a thoughtful way, as opposed to merely a binary. This is bad or this is great. It's nuanced, and I think but we all live that way, and I think that it was the first book to really kind of plant a flag and say we can write about this stuff.
I forget where it is, but there's some essay where maybe you can remember it, that he talks about his writing teachers telling him you're not supposed to put anything in your writing that dates the material.
Right,
And he was like completely reacted against that. It was like, then you can't put cars in there. You can't put telephones. You can't put anything.
He wrote an essay before Internet Jest came out called Unibus Plural.
Yes.
About writing in the age of television.
Yes.
And being consumers of mass entertainment, and how that's, how this stuff, it's an engine for narrative that's out there in the world. Why are we like, these Puritans who want to pretend that it doesn't even exist?
Right.
So. Well, I think we better get to our questions.
Okay, I'm having too much fun. I want to keep
man.
talking.
Yeah, it's a great book.
It is a fantastic
I can talk about it
He's
for a long time.
like a fascinating writer. Fascinating character.
And all of his stuff is here at the Harry Ransom Center.
That's right.
His archives are here.
So I know people can go. I don't know if the manuscript for the book is there.
It is.
It is. But I know like a lot of his reading lists and some of his personal collection and notes and all these kinds of things.
You know how they are there. They collect his lint, his
a little bit of everything.
Paper towel rolls.
His bandanas.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be cool. Right, yeah.
Yeah,
that's in the Hard Rock Cafe. David Foster Wallace bandana.
If you're from out of town and you ever visit Austin, the Harry Ransom Center is probably the first place that I take someone who's visiting from out of town. It's basically my favorite place in the city.
It's great.
Well, okay, so on to our lightning round.
Okay, lightning round.
Okay, all right. So, when was the first time you remember falling in love with a book?
I would probably, it was probably when I was like, I don't know, 13 or 14, I really liked The Lord of the Rings. And also, around the same time, I also read Watership Down.
Okay.
And so both of those were like, oh, these books are cool, man. More books are like, they're absorbing in a way that is like more than just like, oh, I have to read this because it's a school assignment or whatever I was reading for myself. And,
Okay. Has a book ever changed your mind about anything?
I don't know. Like I'm trying to think about what.
Something political or something maybe personal opinion about. I don't know. It's up to you.
I don't know if it like changed my mind. I felt like most of the books that have been meaningful to me are the books that didn't change my mind, but I felt like they came around at the right time to say, yes, that's the way. You have inclinations to go that way, keep going that
Reinforced.
way. It's more reinforcement.
Recognized you for what you wanted to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Has a book ever made you cry?
You sent me these questions before. The first time I ever cried at a book. This is ridiculous.
Good.
The first time I ever cried at a book was in the novelization of Return of the Jedi.
All right.
When I was like 11 years old, and it was, or 12, and it was the description of Darth Vader getting his mask taken off and seeing Luke and having that reconciliation moment.
You cried.
Yeah, dude, it was. I found it very powerful. I'm sure if I look back on it now, I might not even be able to find the passage that I found meaningful. But I was like, oh wow, this is really
cried like a little Luke Skywalker.
like a little Skywalker.
That's the best answer. I love it. Okay, so name a book you've read more than once.
A book that I've read more than once. I've read a bunch of Milan Kundero's books more than one time. A Book of Laughter and Forgetting, Life is Elsewhere.
Unbearable Lightness.
Yeah, Unbearable Lightness of Being. I think I've read each of those at least 2 or 3 times.
What drove you to reread?
I really like Kunderos. Again, like all these, I'm a straight white guy who likes all these like guys who are like, they're authors. I like Kunderos, his authorial presence in those books. They're metafictional without being gamey. He sits in those books as presence and is kind of a stage director. And I find that really intriguing and interesting.
Yes.
Just as they're half a novel and half a musing on philosophy and being and that kind of stuff. I was really attracted to that. I haven't read them in a while, but I really like that stuff.
Okay. Final question: do you have any poetry committed to memory?
I don't. I used to be better at that kind of stuff. I don't have any poetry committed to memory. And if I said yes, would you make me recite it?
Of course I would.
Yeah. So.
What if I said no? You don't have to.
No, I don't have it. There were some a couple of the John Berryman Dream songs that I used to know pretty well. But yeah.
Excellent.
Do you have any poetry committed to memory?
Oh yes.
What do you have committed to memory?
Kubla Khan,
Aha.
Samuel Taylor Coleridge.
I know lots of opening lines.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean,
opening lines
Xanadu
are
did
great.
Kubla Khan, A Pleasure Don't Decrease,
Right.
and then all kinds
Sure,
of shit from there.
Yes. I learned that in high school to impress girls,
Nice.
which probably says more about what I thought would impress girls than just about anything else. It's like, what's going to impress girls?
200-year-old poem.
Romantic
yeah, baby.
poetry.
Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He's the man.
Every schoolgirl's dream. Shannon McCormick, actor, improviser, writer. What else?
That's about it.
That's
Scholar.
about it.
Scholar, not really. Reader,
Overall,
big
great
reader.
guy.
Big reader.
Huge reader.
Pretty
One of
nice
the biggest
person.
readers.
Yeah.
Debater at the
Debater.
Yes. Fantastic. Well, I want to have you back. This
Awesome.
Was
That's great. I have
way
plenty of other books I could talk
This
about.
went way too fast. It
Yes.
really did.
Yes, and we could probably have you back to talk about infinite jest an infinite number of times.
We'll just
maybe we'll
repeat
move
it
on.
over and over
Yes.
again. We're back to the
Yes.
beginning.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, thanks, Shannon.
You're
This
welcome.
has been fantastic.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
And thank you guys for listening.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I was going to say best of luck with the podcast.
Thank you.
very
Yeah.
much.
You should try listening to it.
I will. I'll spread the word and go back and catch up on my listening.
Fantastic.
Yeah, use your formidable social media presence to get the word out. And
yes.
Fever, I want to mention again what's coming up for us.
Yes, okay. Persistence of Vision Publishing. Go to the website, pov-publishing.com, and there you can order my new novel that's out on Amazon, and we are releasing that sucker on June 8th at Malvern Books here in Austin.
Malvern Books.
And at the website, you can read poetry, you can read comics, and you can see what we're up to next and who's coming up on the podcast.
And you can get high as a motherfucker.
You got some heavy hitters in the comics
Right.
group.
Yes.
All those, yeah.
I am very lucky to have known some of these people who have done some fantastic work. You're right, Walt and Shannon Wheeler and
Penny is
Penny.
they've
Just
all
amazing.
been doing stuff for a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic stuff.
Mac White.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
See you next time.
We couldn't do this without you, ladies and gentlemen. We assume.
Bye bye.